my beautiful bookish friends, and welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be doing my February reading wrap up, and it was another successful month. January I read 11 books. This month I think I am on track to read 9 or 10. So the reading goal is going very well. My goal is to read 70 books this year, and we're plugging through. So I'm going to go through the books that I've read so far and what I am finishing up before the end of the month. So let's talk about it. It is currently the 26th when I'm filming this, so there is like 3 more days that I have to read, like today, tomorrow, and Sunday, before February is over. So these are in no particular order. I just have my stack here because I really don't remember what order I read them in. But my February theme was romance, and in that I kind of found that I either was disappointed or so in love with a book that I could not read literally any more romance or anything else in that series. That's why you see 3 books behind me. I did not get to Red, White, and Royal Blue, A Rogue of One's Own, or Love and Gelato, and I'll tell you why. But let's start with one of the ones that I did read and finish, and that is Winterwood by Shea Ernshaw. I read this on audiobook, and a lot of people had said that if I loved The Wicked Deep, I probably wouldn't love The Winterwood as much. And they unfortunately were correct. I was very middle of the road with this book. It gave me half the amount of angst that I wanted or expected from this book, or kind of went in with the anticipation of for this. However, it was a really good story. It's all about a girl who is left alone in a cabin in her house. Like her mom is out, I think, taking care of a relative or something, but they're witches, and basically there's a camp across the lake that they live at, that there are boys who are sent there because they are like, I think it's called wayward boys, but they're like boys who get in trouble a lot, and this is like a reform camp, but the boys there have like completely taken over. The counselors don't care anymore, and they kind of do what they want. And there's a disappearance of a boy, and there is a murder. Basically, the boys who are there do not respect the woods, which is basically what this girl can control. Each witch in her family has a different power, and she is connected to the woods. With that being said, she goes in and finds things in the woods. She finds this lost boy who is supposed to be dead, but she finds him in the woods and he is alive. So it felt very much like a repackaged version of The Wicked Deep. You have the witchy element, someone's missing or someone gets taken. The water is somewhat magical, but instead of it being in a seaside town, it's in a snowy forest, and it just basically got repackaged. However, for me, it was a 4-star when I put it in the pile. However, I think I liked it so much because it was a repackaged version of The Wicked Deep, in my opinion, which is one of my favorite books of all time. So yeah, I really enjoyed it. However, I don't know that I would say it's better than The Wicked Deep. And I guess with it being from an author with a book that I really loved, I am going to compare it to that, even though I should look at them as standalones because they are standalones. However, this one just felt like the same kind of thing, like the absent mother, the kind of seaside, lakeside town, like it all just kind of had a very similar vibe. Next we have Wonder Woman and the Cheetah. This is actually way different than I thought it would be. Based on the cover and the back, I thought this was like a new story of Wonder Woman and the Cheetah, or Wonder Woman 1984, like the movie. This is actually there's a way, like, this is a bind up, but there's like a specific word you use with comic books if it's a bind up. Omnibus, I think is what it's called, but those are like this thick. So this one is like normal size. It's actually all the appearances of Cheetah in the Wonder Woman series, or at least her first appearance in each like iteration of the Wonder Woman series. So we start with, let's see here. I was gonna say it gives me years so I can tell you like when. There's like 2005, 2012, 1943, 1980, 2013, 1981, 2013, 87, 2016, 2005, and 1990. So a lot of these are old, and it's really cool to see the art style kind of change and progress throughout it, because this is obviously like your 2019, 2018 style, but then you have the very first like style with the more newspapery type illustrations. So I really enjoyed this. I think it was a 5 out of 5. Okay, so this is actually a 4 for me. I just checked the cop pile. I gave it an 8 across the board in terms of logic and characters and everything, because there were obviously some that I really, really liked and some versions that I just wasn't as interested in. But overall, it was really good, and I'll, hold on to it and read it again. But this was really cool. Next, we have probably one of my biggest disappointments of the year, and that is Love and Luck by Jenna Welch. So this book I was so excited for, because the way the synopsis describes it is there is a girl who has gotten her heart broken, and we really don't know why or how in the beginning. And that's kind of like the mystery throughout the whole thing until we get to the end of how she got her heart broken. And she's in Ireland, and she's supposed to be going to Italy to visit her friend, who's the main character in Love and Gelato, but her trip gets derailed by one of her older brothers, and they end up going around with his friend around Ireland to all these different places, and she ends up finding a book that is called like the Guidebook to Ireland for Broken Hearts, and she starts following the guidebook. Now, when I first read that, I was like, this is gonna be great. This is gonna be like my experience when I went to Ireland and was heartbroken and all of these things. And I thought it would be one thing, and it turned into another. So it kind of got old to me that we weren't finding out like how she got heartbroken. I thought we would hear like in the first like 30 pages maybe of how she had this long-term boyfriend and they broke up, or he cheated on her, or something that would get me like, okay, this girl is like destroyed for this reason, and I understand why. I didn't understand why. I mean, obviously when you get to that part in the story, it is something horrible, but it wasn't as, I think it was supposed to be this big like, oh my gosh, like pivotal like moment, and it was so drug out that I kind of stopped caring about why she was heartbroken, which probably sounds terrible if you've read this book. But when we got to the reason, I was like, oh my god, that's terrible. However, I feel like it could have been revealed within the first 20 pages, and we would have still had the same amount of impact with it. It felt like very anticlimactic. And really, it was less about her being heartbroken and more about her, like, re-establishing her relationship with her brother that she is closest to in age, who is, like, her best friend. And at some point, I got more invested in reading, like, there's passages like this, and this is supposed to be from the guidebook. So I got more invested in reading the guidebook passages. Like, I want this guidebook. I want to read it. It sounds really cool. Rather than the actual story. Like, it's her and her brother bickering a lot, and him being like, you have to tell mom and dad about what happened, or her being like, I'm not gonna tell mom and dad what happened, and then he's like, you have to. And like, no, I won't. And that happens like 5 or 6 times in the book, and it kind of got old and somewhat annoying. Like, I guess it just wasn't what I expected. Like, I thought this was going to be about someone who's heartbroken, going to Ireland and finding themselves and feeling better while also starting a new relationship and romance with someone else. But that's not what I got. Like, the main character to me just was really whiny, and I read this physically, and that is one thing I can't deal with, either physically or an audiobook, is if a character is whiny, I will lose my mind. Like, it drives me up a wall if a character is whiny, because a lot of times, I've said this in other ones, it's like people blaming the universe for what's happened to them when it's their own doing, and they complain about it instead of fixing it. That wasn't like this book, but just that kind of like, I don't know, that like, I don't want to say woe is me because that's not right, but it just didn't do it for me, put it that way. Like, I didn't connect with the main character like I thought I would. I actually disliked her, and not for any of the reasons of why she got her heart broken, but because of everything else going on. Like, I just didn't connect with her or find her as relatable. So, that being said, this was a 3-star for me. I'm honestly kind of on the fence of if I'm gonna hold on to it and keep it. I guess it will depend on if I love Love and Gelato, which I'll get to at some other point this year, and if I want to keep the whole set. But if the writing is going to be like this for all of them, I'm not going to like it as much, I think. But this one was very short compared to Love and Gelato. That one is much thicker. This one is like just 300 pages, I believe. So, and that, like, Love and Gelato deals a lot more with like death and really heavy topics. This one was fairly light until you got to the reveal portion. So yeah, I don't know how I felt about this. And also, it became more about the brother at several points. Like, it just became more about like the brother living a double life kind of thing at like the entire middle of the book. So I don't know if this is for me. If I don't love Love and Gelato, then I'm just gonna, nix getting Love and Olives, which is set in Greece, and be rid of the series. Next book has nothing to do with this theme. Actually, it does have like a great romance storyline, but that's not like the main storyline. I decided I wanted to finish a series. I needed something fantasy-wise. I was kind of over romance at this point, or, just didn't really know where I was going, what I was going to read next. So I actually ended up finishing The Shadowglass, which wasn't even on this TBR. This is by Rin Chapaco. This is my favorite high fantasy series. I love Caraval and The Bone Witch. Those are my 2 favorite series ever. Oh, and Stalking Jack the Ripper. But they're very different. This was so good. It was the perfect wrap up. I actually listened to it on audiobook, and for some reason I loved it like even more. I didn't listen to this on 2 times speed. A lot of stuff I listened to on 2 times speed because I read fast. So when I'm listening to someone else read and it's reading slow, I will fall asleep. This one I read in like a day. I did not stop listening to it. My headphones were on all the time, no matter what I was doing, listening to this, because it's just so good. Rin Chapaco writes amazing characters and atmospheres, and like, I'm so excited that I have more of her books because I just love it. So I'm gonna go on about this for a little bit, so sorry, we're talking about this for a while. We are following Tia, who I did not realize that's how you say her name because it's spelled T-E-A. So I was saying like T or Tia. It's Tia in this language that they have. We're continuing with the story. So if you don't know, in The Bone Witch, it starts by a storyteller is telling the story of the Bone Witch who has been exiled, and that's Tia. She is a necromancer. She can raise the dead. She can raise deva, which are like different creatures and dragons and stuff like that. And then she's supposed to kill them and take their bezor, which is like a thing in their head, like this gemstone. It's a lot. It's a lot. Okay. So it's just so good. Like, you have to read it to understand. However, throughout this, the first book was basically like her training. You get introduced to everybody, lots of world building, her training to be a bone witch, to follow this like prophecy or her job, right? The next one was more about heart glass, which is like something that everyone has, and it can show like your emotions and if you're evil or not. But then there's someone who like betrays them in that, and then basically it goes between present day, which is the bard telling her story, and the past, which is the story being played out. So in this one, we're still following the story, and basically Tia has burned a city to the ground with her deva, and everybody is like, why would she do this? And she's like, I did it for a good reason. She's found out that she's been betrayed like several times over, that all of these bone witches are being betrayed by their elders, which you find out like real quickly. But basically she gets exiled in this book, and we know that from the very beginning. So it's following, like, we're getting closer to the timelines merging together of when she was exiled and now that she has been exiled and what is happening after that. There is so much goodness in here. The romance is so strong, and I won't say who she ends up with because there's like a love triangle kind of, but like it rips my soul apart. Like there is a death scene in here that just like killed me. I literally just stood and didn't move listening to it because I didn't want to miss a second of it. So good. She becomes so powerful and is questioning whether she's evil and what it even means to be evil and what it means to be good and what it means to be a bone witch and how she can basically save her mentor and save the world. So I just fell in love with it. It was so good. Once again, this was a 5 out of 5. Ren Trepico builds a world beautifully and expands upon it wonderfully and just writes really strong characters. So yeah, 5 out of 5. Like, will read again. I want to reread the whole series already and like tab them all up. That may happen like at some point, not right now, but at some point. So yes, 5 out of 5. Amazing chunker of a book, but super good. Then I finally got to a book that has been on several other TBRs, but wasn't on this one, but fits the theme because it's a romance, and that's Beach Read. I did not understand how this book would destroy me. This book, I mean, people have ranted and raved about it since it came out in April of 2020. That's at least when it was a book of the month and when everyone kind of started getting their hands on it. This is so much more than what I thought it was going to be. I thought it was going to be a really light romance of, like, you know, the curmudgeon-y fiction, like lit fiction writer writing romance and her writing literary fiction instead of romance and finding out about her dad's double life and coping with that. It dealt with so much more. It was like dealing with being at a point in your career where you don't know what you're gonna do or how it's gonna go or if you're even able to succeed in said profession anymore. It was dealing with death. It was dealing with parents who stay together for the sake of the child, even though that might not be like the best option. There was just like mistresses and moving and trying to figure out what you're gonna do next in life, and then like a missed love connection coming back together. It was so much. Like, this book, literally, I had a reading hangover after this because I just didn't, I literally didn't know what to do when it was over. Like, this was like, listened to it in like a day and a half probably, and that was only because I had to work 2 of those days. Otherwise I would have just skipped it altogether, like would have just went through the whole thing altogether. However, it was really amazing and good. Like, there were parts where I would tear up and it was just like so heart-wrenching. But what I really loved about this, and this is gonna be kind of a spoiler, a lot of people care about this in their romance, so if you don't want to know this, maybe like skip ahead a couple seconds. There's no epic breakup and then like some grand gesture to get them back together, if that makes sense. Like, you know, a lot of books, like, they break up and then there's like 100 pages of them being lonely and they're like, just get back together. Like, this was so stupid. Like, it wasn't like a stupid miscommunication. Like, there are good reasons for everything in this book, I'll put it that way. But it was really good, and there's a lot of like really cool dates they go on. I'm like, wow, that's such a good idea. Like, if you wanted to make someone believe in romance again, like, it was super good. I probably will read this again, honestly, because it was awesome. So Beach Read was a 5 out of 5. Yeah, 5 out of 5. I just checked the call pile. So super good. Glad I picked that from book of the month. Then we have the last book that I finished. I also listened to this on audio. This was a really struggle bus month for me with trying to read through books. I ended up having to listen to a bunch of them because I have Libby and Hoopla now. I don't have Audible anymore. And almost all of these are on there. This one I only really read because Libby was like, hey, like, it's available if you want to read it. And I didn't want to put a hold on it again, so I listened to it. However, Bringing Down the Duke by Evie Dunmore. Let's talk about it. I adore historical romance in a way that I never thought I would. I don't know that I would love like mass market romances. I know a lot of people do. But for me, I don't know. I don't know if I would love them as much. However, I love this one, and I am very excited to read it. Read the other ones in the series. So this is about a girl who is basically a maid for her cousin after there was a large scandal in her life when she was young, and she goes to Oxford to be a part of the first class of women to attend Oxford. And she is a suffragette. That's part of the deal with her going there. You have to participate in the suffragette movement. And she's trying to get this duke to endorse them in the Senate, basically. Like, he has royal ties, and he's like friend to the queen, and she's trying to make sure that the women cannot get the vote, and the women are trying to obviously make sure they can get the vote, and they are trying to convince him that he should be on their side and not the queen's side, which, like, okay, way to take on a huge task. However, through like a series of kind of crazy events, like his little brother is kind of a troublemaker and invites all these people to his house for a party, and then he shows up and there's all these people there, and that happens to include some of the suffragettes, and they get stuck there, and thus the romance begins. This was so good that when I was done with it, I was literally in a reading hangover. Like, the romance is so well fleshed out, and maybe it's because they're older. Like, she's in her 20s and he's supposed to be in his 30s, and she's had things happen in her life. Like I said, she had a scandal where, like, her virtue, like, people thought it was compromised. Like, basically they think she's had sex before marriage, and, you know, everyone is like, oh my god, like, how could you do such a horrible thing, and whatever, you know, of the time. And basically he doesn't care about that. Like, he didn't even know who she was or what was going on with her. Like, he does not care that she's not royal. But it takes a really interesting look at things that happened then, and I'm sure probably happen now, with royalty. There are several instances in this book where she's like, I don't want to be your mistress. I don't want you to be married to another person because that's the way this works, and me be your side piece that you spend all your time with, and then but at night you go home to your palace or your castle or your whatever, and you're with your wife and you have children with her, but if we have kids, they'll never be accepted by society, and I'll have to raise them on my own, and once again basically be like exiled and an outcast. And so it's just a really good romance that shows at this time what a lot of people put up with, like women especially. Like, they get arrested at one point. So it's so much more than like a historical romance. Like, I don't think you can just classify it as that, because it takes so, like, there's so much more to the story than just the romance, and that's why probably I liked it so much. A Rogue of One's Own, which is the next one, is about another person in the story. So these are like companion novels, so you don't have to read one to get the other, but I definitely would say you want to read this one first because it establishes the world that we're functioning in. That one is going to give you like someone else, a different perspective, and like a different love story. And then the next one, which is coming out soon or is already out, is a whole nother thing. So really enjoyed this, really liked it, staying on the shelves, 5 stars. Editing Kaylin here. I realized that I did not mention one of the books I read. I completely skipped over the Murder on the Orient Express because I unhauled it already. I passed the book along to my cousin. I gave it a 3-star. It just wasn't as gripping as I thought it would be. It was kind of disappointing. I thought I would really like it and want to like collect all the Agatha Christie's there are. However, that did not happen. I read it. It was a good story, a good twist, kind of like a ooh, but not really super duper engaging. And I listened to it on audio because there's a lot of foreign languages in it. There's a lot of French. There's a lot of like Russian and stuff thrown in there. So I read it on audio, and yeah, I unhauled the physical copy I had already because I'm not going to read it again, and I don't really want to hold on to it. So that is it on that. Back to the video. So now we are through all that, I'm going to tell you guys what I am currently reading. Physically, I am reading Pandora Gets Vain. I'm only like a handful of pages into this. For some reason, I just couldn't get into it. I think because I had to kind of remember where I was in the story, but now I'm refocused and recentered. This is book 2 in the Pandora's Box series. It's a retelling. And so we're on Pandora Gets Vain. They're about to show up to where they are, so the adventure is starting to go. And they're introducing kind of like a romance aspect to it, kind of, with like Homer. So we'll see how this goes. I mean, it is a middle grade, so I'm sure it'll be good and I'll get through it fast. And then on Hoopla, I am listening to The Five, which is a social historical look at the 5 victims of Jack the Ripper, and looking at them then being more than just the 5 victims of Jack the Ripper. So far I have read, let's see, the bookmark's not in the right place. I've read like the first chapter, so I'm only 26 pages into it, but it's all about the first girl who they found, whose name was Polly, and how she was married and had children, which never gets talked about, and I don't even think she was actually a prostitute. We haven't gotten that far yet, but a lot of them talk about this, and they, like, a lot of people just assume that all 5 women were sex workers, and that's actually not the case. A lot of them were in very hard financial straits, and some of them in fact were, but a lot of them were killed while they were sleeping, potentially. So this just takes like a new look at the whole case, and it's not about finding out who he was, because the author says in the beginning, like, I don't care who he was, basically. I just want to give these women like the story that history didn't tell about them, because they deserve it, because they were people, and I love that. So it's read by the author, so there's a lot of passion, and it keeps it very interesting when listening to it. So this is basically taking me out of my reading hangover from all of this romance and being like either highly disappointed or so into the book that I'm just like slumpy afterwards, because how do you carry on after a book that awesome? So yeah, I am going to continue reading today, and hopefully, I mean, these will probably be on there by the end of the month. Like, I'll get through these fairly quickly, hopefully. And yeah, that is it. So if you guys enjoyed, make sure you subscribe, because on Monday I will have my March TBR. It is that big old stack of dark books back there, because our theme for March is Disney Twisted Tales, so I will go through all of the ones I'm trying to read in March. So if you guys enjoyed this, make sure you subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.